Okay, streaming is on, Jesse. So Maria, you want to just give a general intro first?
Yeah, I'll just do the, thank you. Good evening, everyone who's joining us on the panel and in the audience. This community meeting is being held virtually, being recorded, and is going to be accessible on YouTube after this meeting is held. This meeting is being hosted by Manhattan Community Board 4's Housing, Health, and Human Services Committee. This is not our usual monthly committee meeting, which is held the third Thursday of each month, with the exception of August. CB4 is having this meeting to learn more about the shelters coming to or already in existence within the district. The more recent ones, there are 4 of them that are going to be, or 3 to 4 of them that are going to be discussed tonight. And I just want to share for people who don't know who are on this meeting, the district runs between 14th Street to 59th Street, west of 6th Avenue, from 14th to 26th Street, west of 6th to the river, and west of 8th, 26th to 59th Street. Joe, I'm not sure if you want to do self introductions at the moment, or if you want to give the floor to.
No, I want to just sort of give the sort of what's going to happen tonight. So welcome everybody. Welcome all the members of the community and public who are here, along with the members of DHS and the providers. First and foremost, we thank DHS and providers for coming here tonight. We decided to have this as a special meeting because this is such a major issue in our district. And we will have a presentation from the providers at these shelters. We will hear a short presentation from DHS, but because of some specific time constraints, we are first starting with some remarks from our council member, Eric Botcher, regarding these shelters. But I want to step back for a moment and say, what are we talking about tonight? We're talking about 4 locations: 440 West 41st Street on the corner of Dyer Avenue. That is a family shelter that the community board was notified of during the middle of 2020 during the COVID crisis, and we asked things to be postponed. And then about 3 weeks ago, we were informed that in fact, that was in fact opening soon. That is 100 units of shelters for families. The next 3, 81 units at Clinton Family and 521 West 49th Street. That is to be run by Homes for the Homeless, who had previously occupied the building many years ago. Again, a permanent family shelter. But then in this same 3-week period, we learned that there would be the Skyline Motor Inn with approximately 232 shelter beds would be reopened for shelter, and the Travel Inn, 140 beds, would be open for shelter. Skyline on between 49th and 50th on west side of 10th Avenue, Travel Inn just west of 10th Avenue on West 42nd Street. So in total, we have an increase of 558 shelter beds in a very short period of time. We knew about the 100 beds on West 41st, the others we did not. That is the sum total of the basic information. We're going to get a lot of detail tonight, and then we're going to talk. We want to hear from the providers, but then we want to hear from the community, specific questions, remarks, and comments. And I want to thank DHS has a number of people here tonight from a high level of responsibility, and they will introduce themselves after we get going. But if we can start out, because of time constraints, with Eric Botcher, our council member.
Thanks so much, Joe. Thanks to CB4 and everyone for having this forum. As Joe said, tonight we're going to hear about a number of sites, and each site is different. The Skyline Hotel, for example, housing homeless families. I had a meeting with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs and DHS last week with elected officials, and that a huge number of the people there are asylum seekers from Central and South America. We heard about that on a Thursday night. They opened on a Friday. Around the corner, there's a family shelter reopening actually. That was a family shelter like over a decade ago, and it's been on Community Board 4's statement of needs that to have that reopen. So that is reopening. Just happens to be next to the Skyline, which is temporary, we're told. So we'll be hearing more about that. We've been in close touch with Akasia, who's here tonight. about that family shelter. We will be having a supply drive. Most of the families there are parents with infant age children. We're going to hear a lot more about that temporary location and the permanent one that's coming. 440 West 41st Street. As Joe said, that's something that had been discussed a while ago. Family shelter on 41st Street. The Travelers Inn was being used by DHS for years and years, actually, to house families. And we found out after the fact that the population had been changed to single men, folks requesting accommodations in shelters. The reason why this forum is so important is communication. We've got to get the information out to the community and have this conversation as a community. And I was encouraged years ago when the de Blasio administration said that they were going to start constructing permanent shelters and housing and move away from the use of hotels. During COVID, the opposite happened because of what happened during COVID when they had to get everyone out of congregate shelters. Now the congregate shelters are back open, and for a number of reasons that we're hearing tonight, folks back in the hotels, because New York is a right to shelter city. What I've been speaking with the commissioner about, and the commitment I have from the commissioner, is that we need to be more intentional about the placement of folks in hotels, and not just take this one, take that one. We need to look at the map in my council district, in other areas of my council district, where we can be intentional, work with the community board, and plan ahead to have a proper placement of the hotels with community support, social services. I know that Community Board 4 is a great partner in this, but we have to give folks the opportunity to partner and sit down and plan ahead and make sure that we do this the right way. So again, I want to thank Community Board 4. I have an incredible staff. Jordan Feiner from my office is here. I want to encourage anyone who has any issues at all to reach out to our office, District 3 at council.nyc.gov. I look forward to tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Eric. A couple things just to factual. Community Board 4 in its statement of district needs asked for a family shelter, not two family shelters. The notice on all of these projects was abysmal. DHS has agreed to that. We found out because community residents reported seeing mattresses moved into the buildings, and then there was a notice presented. There was a confusion between the Skyline and the Family Inn on West 49th Street, and parts of DHS did not even know that Skyline was reopening. These are all facts on the ground, but the most important fact that we're going to be able to look at tonight is the question of concentration of services. The district goes from 14th Street to 59th Street, below 26th to 6th Avenue, and then above that 8th Avenue to the river. However, you will see a map that shows the majority of homeless facilities are concentrated here, north in Hell's Kitchen. And that is the reason that there's such a heavy attendance tonight, because our community board has been welcoming for many, many years social services, but not the concentration of social services, let alone the poor management of those social services and shelter facilities. I'm going to turn it over to Jeffrey, our board chair, who is actually at home ill with COVID, and again, wanted to speak because of time constraints, and then we'll go into the full meeting. Jeffrey?
Joe, thank you. And I just wanted to say hello and thank you to all the agency partners and the nonprofits that are here presenting tonight. Joe alluded to this, but 82 folks in our attendance this evening isn't a typical attendance. And so obviously this issue is of significant importance. The council member mentioned a lot of things that are true and very important. And likewise, notification has been abysmal. And so I think we're here to learn a lot. Hopefully, the city is willing to take some feedback as it relates to what the community has to say. And surely there'll be more coming out of the community board as it relates to this topic. So looking forward to tuning in and hearing from everybody tonight. Thanks, Joe and Maria.
Thanks, Jeffrey. So again, as general background, right? Our community board is open to social services and supportive housing and affordable housing. Not even a question. We will put up in a moment a map showing where these services are throughout our district. However, during COVID, we had 2,200 units of COVID shelter housing open in our district that was poorly managed, that created all kinds of issues and created incredible public safety difficulty, which in fact, unfortunately persists. This has been an impact on our neighborhood and the welcoming community. This has pushed people to actually change their positions on being welcoming for social services and homeless facilities. There are too many service facilities concentrated in single blocks next to each other, on top of each other. The clients interact. If you have a bad provider, and the bottom line is in social services, there are good, responsible, solid providers who produce and are able to manage facilities like Homes for the Homeless. And then there are others that have not shown that record, that do not manage the facilities well, that create all kinds of problems for our district. So therefore, when you combine that recent experience in 2020 and 2021 with the poor management of facilities, and then the absolutely, and I say this with heartfelt sadness, abysmal record of notice and engagement with our community about homeless facilities. This is what you get. People not being welcoming and saying, don't do this. But on top of it, the district is wider. It's Chelsea and Hell's Kitchen. And the facilities are all in Hell's Kitchen and they're all in proximity to one another. A request the community board has made is that the two temporary facilities, the Travel Inn and the Skyline, be relocated to other parts of the city or other parts of our district, irrespective of the populations being served. Too many people with too many social service problems in one location is a clear recipe for community problems. So we put that out there as a major thing we're talking about tonight. Now, Maria, I want to turn to you about best practices.
I just want to highlight or reinforce something that you said, because we were involved in it so much, is how impacted the community was as a result of the emergency relocation shelter sites in the spring of 2020 that were here through the fall of 2021. And on one city block, there were over 800 individuals relocated, right? And I keep hearing discussion about abysmal communication and notice, and that is what happened at that time. And I feel like we're going through that again in terms of when the board found out about these sites being here. 3 out of the 4 sites being here is what I'm referencing. We'll get into the details in a minute. In terms of best practices, what I want to share with everyone is that what has been beneficial for the community is when there's a collaboration. And I'm speaking really directly to DHS. That's speaking with the community, speaking at the CB4 meetings, engaging the tenant associations, ongoing open communication with local elected officials, and public meetings like this one, we really believe is really critical. These efforts by DHS and the shelter providers, when that does happen, has led to, for example, a rooftop garden at BRC in Chelsea, furniture on the roof for clients at CFH and Hell's Kitchen, that's Care for the Homeless, security patrols that go beyond the minimum of the front entrance of a site, resources for residents at different sites, and even forming community advisory boards, which include several stakeholders. And those are some of the things that have come out from the collaborations of all of us working together, DHS, the shelter providers, the community board. The goal of this meeting is to hear from the providers of 3 of the 4 shelter sites, AKA temporary housing sites in our district. Akasia has 2 temporary sites, the Travel Inn on 42nd for single adults and the Skyline on 49th for families. Homes for the Homeless is also going to have a shelter on 49th Street for families, but that's going to be a permanent site. The location they are moving into, as noted already, was a site before that ran for over 10 years. Finally, not here today, but I think it's worth noting is that West Ave, a shelter for families, is going to be on 41st Street. And to give an idea of, I don't know if you have the map up or not, Joe, because I see you in a little square, but
I will in a moment.
All right, I was hoping you would throw it up and then you can jump into that. To give an idea of what it looks like, you'll see it on the map, which is also accessible on the CB4 website under the Housing, Health, and Human Services Committee. And I think it's worth noting, Joe, also that within right now, what we're talking about in this meeting is within 10 blocks, single adult site, and 3 sites for families with children. And with families with children, that's over 400 people we're talking about. And I'm excluding the single adults, which you mentioned, brings us over 500 to over 500.
So I wanted to, it was one thing before I go to the map, and that is the co-chairs of this committee, myself, Joe Restuccia, I'm the executive director of Clinton Housing. As part of our work with affordable housing, we build and operates a supportive housing. So we're very familiar with it. Maria Ortiz is a psychotherapist, social worker working at the Ryan Center. She's very familiar with the population. We are not coming from a spot or a location in our community. We are not familiar with the needs and difficulties of clients of this nature. So we are not speaking, and I want to make it very clear for the audience, for DHS, and for the providers, this is anything but a NIMBY community. Unfortunately, you've now reached this is enough community. I'm going to put up and share the screen of a map that we have. And this is a little bit difficult to see. Please tell me, some of the members, if you cannot see it, if it's make it larger. I'll make it a little bit larger. Is that better, Maria?
Yes, much better.
Okay. So this is a list of all of the shelters, social service facilities, and supportive housing we have in the district. And the ones in green, Skyline, Skyline, 521 West 49th, Travel Inn, and now the 440 West 41st are new as of July. So we are talking an incredible number of beds in our district. And you can see, sorry, that we are not talking about a few beds in our district. It is well over 2,000. They are all clustered here in the major heart of Hell's Kitchen, or north of 42nd Street. This indicates that this community is one that has reviewed these facilities, has engaged with these providers, and is extremely adept at managing through this. The map for the southern part of our district barely has a mark on it whatsoever. That's why we asked DHS to work with us to properly distribute these facilities throughout the city and our district, and not just be opportunistic as to the most easy hotel to use. We have a lot of leadership of DHS here tonight. And I'm gonna go through and just call them out by first name, introduce yourselves, and then we're gonna go to the provider so the public can understand who is here. Starting out with Molly.
Good evening. Thanks so much for having us. I'm Molly Park. I'm the first Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Homeless Services.
Marika.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Marika Scott. I am the Deputy Commissioner of Intergovernmental and Legislative Affairs. I want to, of course, thank everyone for being here, as well as Community Board 4 for hosting this meeting. Thank you.
Leilani.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening, rather. My name is Leilani Irvin. I'm the Manhattan Borough Director for the Department of Social Services. Pleasure to be with you all.
Doreen.
Good evening. My name is Doreen Howe. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Family Services here at the Department of Homeless Services.
Cindy.
Cindy is.
She's not with us?
No, she's not.
Yvonne can represent for single adults.
Oh, yes, Yvonne.
Hi, good evening. I'm apologizing in advance, but I'm having technical difficulties. That's why you can't see my picture. But I'm Yvonne Ballard, Associate Commissioner for Shelter Operations for the Adult Division.
Melissa. She with us? Leilani?
Yes, Melissa Ramos is with us. She may
Yes.
not be able to unmute herself,
Okay.
but Doreen Ho is on to represent families. Doreen.
Yes,
if you'd like
she
to
introduced herself.
Oh, I just introduced myself. Yes.
Yes. And then Whitney.
Yes, hello, good evening. My name is Whitney Hopkins. I'm the program administrator on the family side.
And Leilani, have I missed anyone from the DHS side?
I don't believe so. No, that's oh, and John Hammond is on the line.
John?
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Hammond. I'm a program administrator with DHS, partner with Akasia to work with travel.
And then from Homes for Homeless, we have Aaron.
Hi, thank you so much for the introduction, Joe, and the rest of the community board. My name is Aaron Goodman. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer at Homes for the Homeless.
Gretchen from Homes for the Homeless. Gretchen, we have no sound from you. Okay, we'll come back to you. And then Linda from Homes for the Homeless.
Hi, I'm Linda Bezergian. I'm the Managing Director of Communications for Homes for the Homeless.
And I see a hand. I see a hand raised from Haley. You are from?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Haley Nolasco, Assistant Deputy Commissioner of Intergovernmental and Legislative Affairs at DSS.
I'm sorry, I didn't miss you, Haley. I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you.
And then from Akasia, Amaryllis.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amaryllis Soler, Assistant Vice President for Akasia Network Housing. And in my portfolio, I oversee all the children, families with children's sites.
James from Akasia.
How you doing, everybody? My name is James Baggett. I am the program coordinator for Akasia Network Housing, overseeing all the family with children sites.
Stephanie.
Sorry about that. I am Stephanie Bennett. I'm the program coordinator for Akasia, representing Travel In.
And is either China or China?
China.
China.
Good evening, everybody. My name is China Rivera, and I'm the program director for Skyline.
And then Kamia, or Kamia.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Kamia Nelson. I'm the program director for Travelers In.
Thank you all for attending, and we'd like to start out with Homes for the Homeless. And I first want to thank you very much. As a part of our standard community board process now for social service organizations, we ask people to submit a checklist of all sorts of information about the nature of the facility, what it is, what they're doing. They have submitted this to the community board. There's a few questions we have for them that are not quite right, but we will have this updated and posted on the community board website so everyone in the neighborhood can see it and get the full information. We will do the same. Akasia is will work on the same thing. So again, we have one for each site, and therefore you will be able to see exactly what is the. Can you mute Yvonne for a moment, Jesse? Getting feedback. So we'd like to start out with a discussion and presentation by Homes for the Homeless. Aaron.
Thanks so much, Joe. Really appreciate that. And again, thank you to the community board for having us. Thank you to Councilperson Botcher for the nice introduction there as well. Like it's been said, Homes for the Homeless is here to discuss the Clinton Family Residence, which will be a tier 2 shelter for families with children experiencing homelessness that will be opening at 521 West 49th Street this September. Now, myself and Gretchen Hernandez, our Deputy Executive Director, have some prepared remarks. Following that, we're more than happy to take any questions you have about the Clinton or about the programs that we will have offered there. And following this presentation, as stated, Akasia will be presenting about the Skyline and Travelers, its temporary hotels, and they, along with the Department of Homeless Services, Officials here will be able to address any questions the community board or any members of the public have about notifications, about siting, shelter density, or other facilities in this district. So like I said, I am the Chief Administrative Officer at Homes for the Homeless, and that is the name of the social services provider to operate at the Clinton through a contract with DHS. As the Chief Administrative Officer, my role is ensuring Homes for the Homeless's central business functions, including human resources, information technology, and procurement. Before I turn this over to Gretchen Hernandez, who will be able to give greater programmatic and operational detail about the Clinton Family Residence, I'd like to take a moment to give you some background about HFH. This organization was founded in 1986. And since that date, HFH has provided top-rate social services and essential shelter to over 55,000 families with children experiencing homelessness. And throughout its history, HFH has spent considerable time designing programs that provide homeless families, largely headed by young single women, with education, employment, parenting, and life skills they need to gain and retain permanent housing. 34 years of experience has taught us that housing alone will not break the cycle of homelessness. Rather, a holistic approach to shelter services is needed, and that is precisely what HFH and its community residential resource centers provide. Now today, Homes for the Homeless operates 4 Tier 2 shelters. These shelters are safe, clean, and welcoming, with 3 in the Bronx and 1 in Jamaica, Queens, with the most recent opening at our Soundview location in March of 2020. We currently provide shelter and related services to about 530 families and 725 children on any given day. And these facilities provide a host of services focused on social services, education, and employment, designed to meet the ongoing needs of both parents and children. With a goal of opening in September of 2022, we look forward to bringing these services to the Clinton Family Residence, which will provide 81 units for families with children, as well as ample social services and recreation space. As many of you know, Homes for the Homeless operated at Tier 2 at this site before, known as the Clinton Family Inn, from 1993 through 2015. And as an integral part of the community, Homes for the Homeless had significant success providing essential services to families during that time. Since then, the building at 521 West 49th has been renovated and updated, and HFH is excited to bring its services back to this community and to work with the community board, with local schools, with small businesses, and nonprofit partners to ensure stability for the families with children that we serve. Indeed, not only are we open to joining a community advisory board through DHS guidance in order to collaborate and communicate with representatives of the community board, we will continue to seek out other ways of collaboration as well, including promoting and holding job fairs for facility staffing and identifying local employers for client referrals. Now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Gretchen Hernandez, our Deputy Executive Director, who can offer a little bit more detail about the programs and services and collaborations we will offer at the Clinton, and further information about the building itself and our security plans.
Gretchen, we can't hear you.
One moment while we figure this out.
Yep.
Just give us a second. Gretchen will come into my office and
yeah.
And could I just
we'll play tag
suggestion
team.
that it might
switch
be
seats? That'll be the fastest probably in tech.
Hi, good evening. I'm so sorry. I'm having some issues with my computer. Again, my name is Gretchen Hernandez. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Homes for the Homeless. And tonight I'll talk to you a little bit about what the 49th Street project is going to look like. Again, as Aaron stated, this is going to be a Tier 2 shelter for families and children. We will have 81 units. Each family will have an individual unit where they will be able to cook their own meals because they'll have a kitchenette. They will also have their own bathrooms, plenty of room for storage in the units as well.
Excuse me, Gretchen. I hate to interrupt, but can you explain to the folks that are listening who don't know what a tier 2 shelter is in a sentence or two?
A tier 2 shelter is basically a facility that provides services to families and children. And when we say a family could consist of a single parent with a child. It could be a couple with children. It can also be a single female pregnant. So that's what we will be providing at 49th Street. That will be our population that we'll be working with. We will have the facility will consist of several departments. We will have a security department, which will be at the site 24 hours, 7 days a week. We will also have a housekeeping maintenance department to just make sure that our facility stays clean and well maintained. We will have a family services department, which will consist of case managers, also licensed social workers, housing specialists. Housing specialists are the staff that basically works with the families to find them permanent housing, as well as a director which will oversee and supervise all services being provided to the families. We are also going to be providing recreation services for the children. And this consists of, we'll do tutoring for those children that are in school. We also provide different type of partnerships. In our other sites, we do, things like yoga or, STEM programs. So we plan on bringing those services as well to 49th Street. We also work with the parents. We do different type of activities as well with the parents. And, it could be anything from financial literacy to GED classes, ESL classes. So it just all depends on what our population is in need of. Basically, that's going to be the makeup of the program. The building has 15 floors. The residents will be living from the second floor all the way to the 12th floor, and then the other floors will be used as offices.
Gretchen, thank you very much. Any other speakers from Homes for the Homeless?
No.
Aaron? No? Okay. So, and I also want to note the public, we'll have the presentation by Akasia next and then DHS. But if you're interested in speaking or asking a question, please raise your hand and we will be able to bring you over into the panel to ask that question. Okay, turning it over to Akasia. Amaryllis?
Everybody, Akasia Network Housing is a social service provider managing shelter for the Department of Homeless Services. We are one of the largest providers in the city, so we come with a lot of experience in managing quality services and quality shelters for all types of populations. Our sites are located in all 4 boroughs. But tonight we're here to speak to you about the Skyline Hotel, where Akasia Network Housing has had a history with the COVID pandemic. We were using the hotel as a shelter as well, and it closed down, and we were invited again to manage a shelter out of that hotel, given the needs of the city right now. At the Skyline Hotels, we host families with children. That means that we have a fairly large population at the site. It's a large building. We will be providing the typical social services on site, similar to the prior provider, case management, social work, employment, recreation, and being that leading these families to permanency is the top goal for us as a provider. Obviously, permanent housing assistance and search and placement. We're still getting ourselves staffed up and organized because we did open up the site in a short period of time. But so far, we haven't experienced any major incidents. Our staffing is almost complete. While we bring on board 100% of what is going to be the permanent team at this site, we have brought on site a team that we borrow from our various other sites so that there is coverage, so that the staff, they are present to take care of the families and deliver the services. I have with me the program director, who is a trained social worker with a lot of experience delivering services to homeless families. She's worked with us in our other shelters. And I have the program coordinator who directly supervises the program director, James Baggett. One of the services that's really important to us is that being that, school enrollment is around the corner and we are dealing with a large number of children, we have a Department of Education representative on site with us, and we're already heavily involved in getting the families with school-age children organized for the process of enrolling the children in school. And our staff is really assessing the families well, so that we know what the immediate needs are, so that we can tackle those needs immediately. We're working to connect the families to all the services that they need, whether they're medical services, starting from like immunizations for the kids, COVID vaccines for everybody, getting a physical, connecting them, like I said, to the school, connecting them to legal services if that's what they need. Each family comes to us with their own series of needs. And so each case is different. And so, we meet the client where they are and then provide the assistance that they need. We are part of a very large social service umbrella organization, Akasia Network. And so we do have a lot of internal resources that we tap into. We operate our own community clinics. We provide all types of social services, from mental health to substance use to youth programming and educational programs, employment services. All of that exists within the network, but our clients are not obligated to accept only our internal services. We partner with a lot of other organizations and other providers out there to really make sure that our families receive the best care and the best service that they deserve. I'm going to call on my team to see if they want to add anything else, but that's where we are.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is James Baggett. I'm the program coordinator for Akasia Network Housing for Families with Children. I'd just like to add on what Ms. Solis just said regarding the families here. So a lot of the families here, some of them come with just the clothes on their backs, no formula for the children. We rallied the troops, for lack of a better word. We've gotten donations from some of our resources, and we've provided donations such as formula, diapers. We've got baby clothes, clothes for adults, males, adult women, and children. And we're giving these donations out. We are partnering with the Department of Education, who is on site at our site, who is also providing donations. Some of the families don't have strollers for the babies, for the children. And the Department of Education stepped in and they helped to provide these things for some of our families. As Amola said, we have a lot of resources within Akasia Network, and we do tap into those resources. We've had 3 families that already we've gotten employment with just in the first week that we met them. They're actually working now. Our goal, and it always has been our goal, is to reintegrate the families back out into the community. Permanent housing, that's what we strive for. And everything that we do in between is to help us to meet those goals and to be able to place these families into permanent housing. But we just don't place them into permanent housing and leave them. When we do place them into permanent housing, we make sure they're connected in the community to the library, know where the police station is, the fire department, all the other different resources that a family may need to help them sustain themselves while they're in the community. China, do you want to add anything to that? Did I miss anything?
Nope, you didn't miss anything.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just want to note for everyone at DHS, the community board received a number of questions already. And for the members of the public who want to speak, again, please raise your hand on Zoom. And I have a list of people who had a problem raising their hand. They've been using the Q&A, and I will call those out and have them brought over. But just to give you a flavor of some of the questions that have been coming here, please provide us with a current number of homeless shelter rooms broken out by Manhattan neighborhoods. Please list locations in Hell's Kitchen already utilize the shelters, and that is exactly what you will see on the map. There are a number of people who have said specifically what kind of services are being provided. That will come again when we get a full questionnaire and a full social service checklist so we can see it, and then you'll be able to look at it, communicate it, and in a meeting in September of the Housing Committee, we will talk about this in detail. One person wrote, as a resident of Hell's Kitchen since the late 1980s, I know my neighborhood very well. When COVID began, those in power made a poor decision to house the majority of the city's homeless and many violent offenders from Rikers and hotels in my neighborhood. The quality of life took a big turn. Drug use, daily crime, and daily harassment, specifically by locals, by those at the Skyline Hotel, was out of control. I will note for the public, the Skyline was operated by Akasia during that period. The drug use, now again, as always, we're bearing the brunt of the city's homeless. When will this stop? When will a new shelter be created on the Upper East Side or the Upper West Side? It's a bit late to have a webinar about planned shelters that are already in place. I know this as I live down the street from the Skyline Hotel, and nearly every night since it's reopened, there's been an ambulance or police vehicle in front for the past week. And to the point, this person says, thank you, Mayor Adams, you're doing a great job. Another person says, we're not an NIMBY neighborhood. Hell's Kitchen already harbors the city's largest concentration of shelters and supportive housing. We are recovering from the oversaturation of homeless hotels during COVID that deteriorated an already stressed quality of life to residents. We've seen again, time and time again, with adequate support, the population wreaks havoc on our quality of life. What support programs are in place to make sure the residents are not afford to walk on their streets? What is the status of the current plan at Travel Inn? Numerous children get at the M42 bus stop to attend school at 41st and 10th. Will there be a foot patrol assigned to this location? I'd like to start out with DHS and maybe begin with Molly, and remember to keep that we have this 114 people, probably of which at least 10 or 20 or 30 want to speak tonight. So Molly, I'll turn it over to you from DHS.
Absolutely. Actually, Marika, did you want to start out?
Yes, I wanted to start
Marika,
out,
sorry.
so thank you.
Sorry.
No worries. Thank you so much. I just wanted to immediately talk to some of the questions that you had, but before, of course, thanking everyone for being here again, thanking you for having us and allowing our providers to talk about their services today and talk about really what we're bringing into the community. Many of the questions that you just outlined spoke to issues around emergency, the COVID emergency, and now another emergency that we are experiencing here at DHS, which is really stressing our system. And that includes something that you might have heard of recently in the news, but is a part of why we've moved into this area in the way that we have, and we've made notifications very quickly in these cases because we saw an uptick in our families with children, area of need, and we had a low capacity. And at that time, we started to move, and because of our moral and legal obligation, we did have to open shelters rather quickly, which led to a lot of which we can admit to some missteps in terms of notifications, but we at this time, we have to speak to the emergency need. We have buses of asylum seekers coming into our communities, into New York City from border states. And we know that, again, our obligation is to house everyone who needs and wants housing. And therefore, we are going not just into this community, but really stretching our families with children services into reopening some of the hotels that we had committed to coming out of for our families. So we're seeing an expressed need, just as we saw that in COVID, just as we saw that in other emergencies. We are here today coming to you really again, asking you to be a part of the solution here and help us house these families who by no fault of their own have come into our communities, have come into our country. And we are here and committed to housing them, to welcoming them with open arms, to really, and I know this has been a part of the community's past, to bring the families with children and other services into the community and really hold them very close and be a part of that community. So I just wanted to start off that way. I know in some ways we got off to the wrong foot because of the emergency and the notifications did not come timely enough. And that is to be acknowledged, really, it is. But we are here now. We are here, we have this issue, and we are able to solve it with these openings. Well, and there'll be other things that we need to do, but this is part of our reaction and response to the emergencies. And later we'll have, I'm sure you have many questions around that, and I will turn the floor over to Molly Park, who will have some more in-depth information for you, as well as maybe some more numbers around that. But we're here, and I wanted to express that welcome that you've always had in the past, that we know is there in the community. We want to thank you for that, and we want to express that we hope that will extend to these new families coming in to our system. Molly.
Thank you. Joe, you were firing off questions, rapid fire. I was writing them down as fast as I could. I am sure you will remind me when I have missed things.
And Molly, since I started speaking, another 15 have come in. So keep going.
All right. You know, if you want to feed them to me one at a time, I can also take them that way. So, you know, we are very much committed to working to distribute shelters across the city. I think that was something that I heard sort of repeatedly in the questions. As we are citing new long-term sites, that the distribution across the city is absolutely a priority for us. So we are, you know, I have a map that I look at with City Hall senior leadership on a regular basis that shows density of shelters by council district. That is a focus, and it is something that absolutely factors into when we are approving new long-term shelters. So, you know, I hear you on Upper West Side, I hear you on Upper East Side. There are a couple of other neighborhoods that have lighter footprints. Those are all ones that we are looking at. That is a factor, absolutely, for how we think about your community for long-term shelters as well. We have been faced with an emergency. We have had since, you know, there was no sort of moment when this started, but since we started tracking this trend, we've had about 3,500 individuals coming to us from the southern border in a quite short period of time, right? 6 weeks or so. That's a big stress on our system, and we are working in the neighborhoods where there are large commercial hotels. It's not where I want to be. We are absolutely committed to being out of commercial hotels across the board by the end of 2023. That is something that we've said publicly before. It remains a commitment with the Skyline in particular. We said to you when we came a few weeks ago that it is a 6 to 9 month use. We remain committed to that use, to that answer. Commercial hotels are not well suited for shelter, particularly for families with children, because they don't have kitchen facilities. We actually had succeeded. We were out at the end of the calendar year 2021, and it is heartbreaking for me that we are back in, and it is not what we are going to be doing going forward. We are here because we are in this urgent situation, facing the asylum seekers, not what the plan is. Our plan is to do much more strategic long-term siting of shelters. That being said, as Marika noted, we are not going to abandon our legal and moral obligation to house the people who are seeking shelter. I think there were a number of questions about services. I think Homes for the Homeless spoke very eloquently about their services, and they may want to chime in with more detail. The base services for any site are, there is going to be operational services around the clock, security, 24/7 security. There are in a hotel setting, there's meals, so that would not be the case for Homes for the Homeless, but it certainly is for the Skyline. So there's sort of, and the maintenance and operations, right? And then you have caseworkers, you have housing specialists, and then a range of other services that are going to be a little bit more specialized. That's the case for every DHS shelter, and then each site has its own nuances, and I will let the providers speak to that. Joe, you look poised to say something.
Yes, because I'm trying to do the management of the meeting at the same time. Yeah. So I thank you very much, Molly. I appreciate it. So I just want to say one comment, and then we're going to need to start to bring people over. And Jesse, I'd like to bring over a combination of both community members and board members, because there's so many people who want to speak. I want to give them an equal chance. Remember, when you are brought over to ask a question or make a comment, you really will have just about a minute, maybe a minute and a half, because many people want to speak tonight. I do want to note one thing for Marika and for you, Molly. We are historically an immigrant community. We know all about this, right? And we have people who have been undocumented here for decades before anybody walked in the door from the current administration at DHS or this mayor's office. However, it does not mean because we have the commercial hotels here that you choose the easiest and quickest way, even in our district, to say everything is concentrated above 30th Street to 59th Streets, west of 8th Avenue. That's what I want you to hear, and that's what you have to hear from our constituents and people who live and work here. It is not about we do not help and we are not part of a solution. That's a given. It's that because we're part of the solution, now it seems when there's an opportunity, that's what DHS does, and on top of it, gives no notice. So we're going to reiterate the request that both the travel-in location and the Skyline be relocated elsewhere in the city or elsewhere in our district that distributes things around. We've now started to bring over people to ask questions, and I want to get the public to say how they feel and what their issues are, starting with Travis Rogers and then Marissa Rodanti. Bring her over, please. We're bringing them over in order as I'm seeing them on the screen, following by David.
As you're bringing them over, Joe, can we just respond to your last statement?
Of course.
Which of course I want to wholeheartedly say we do hear you. We do understand the points that you're making. As we've committed to in other meetings, we are looking for different sites that can accommodate this, but we have an obligation, as we have said, to move forward. So we're not saying anything. As you said, we agree, but I think it's worthwhile to emphasize that we hear you, we understand, and we are looking. And this is temporary as we speak about this, the Skyline and so forth. We are, which is a temporary situation that we are looking to move away from for obvious reasons, but one of them includes being a part of this conversation with you and the rest of the community.
And also, Marika, just be aware, we've had 2.5 years of people say, we hear you. We want to make sure that you hear and you act. So we all work together on this.
Absolutely.
Go to Travis, followed by Marissa Rodanti, and then David.
I want to thank everyone for their time here and attending the meeting. And I want to commend you for the work that you do. It was mentioned by Marilis.
Just introduce yourself, where you're from, please. Everyone say where you are, where you're from, and where you live, so we have an idea.
Travis Rogers, 42nd Street. And I wanted to ask a question about the Skyline, because it was mentioned that Akasia ran the Skyline during COVID. That was, in my opinion, very poorly managed at the time, and the residents there were a menace in our neighborhood. And so what changes have been done to the management style of that Skyline location to ensure that the residents will not be a menace in our community again?
Let's hear from Akasia on that, please, and very, very quickly.
Thank you, Travis. I'm sorry to hear that the prior experience with the Akasia shelter that operated out of Skyline was a menace to the community. Prior to this site, the site operated for single adults. And if I remember correctly, there were 3 different shelters operating out of the same building at the same time. So that kind of lent itself for chaos, I imagine. What I can speak about is, well, you know, where we are now, because this is under my portfolio. Big difference is families with children. There tends to be a lot less trauma when it comes to families. These are regular families, mom and dad, children, just like myself, just like many of you, the people that in the audience. And all they want is to get their life stable. So we have a full team. Our focus is really to provide the services to stabilize the family and lead them to permanent housing as quickly as possible. So this is not a setup where, you know, people are hanging out in the street at all hours of the night. Families want to attend to their children, want to make sure they're safe, and want to make sure they're taken care of. And that's where our focus is, and that's our commitment to the clients that we have there. We have the team that's well-trained, that's knowledgeable. I supervise, James and I run 8 tier 2 sites throughout the Bronx and Queens. And they're some of the best performing shelters that DHS has according to the scores that we're getting. And so we're doing things right. We have the right amount of experience, and you know, our heart is in it. Our commitment is there. So all I can say is, this is my promise.
Can I chime in as well that, you know, DHS is working very, very closely with Akasia. Melissa Ramos, who's on the line, is a terrific program administrator for DHS and is out at the site on a regular basis. So we have faith in Akasia, but we are also working to make sure that operations are sound.
Let's go next to Marissa Redanti.
Hi, I'm glad Travis is here because we worked together very closely, specifically on the Skyline. I am sorry to say I do not have confidence in Akasia being able to manage it. I say that out of our experience with trying to get services to the gentlemen that were in that shelter, and they were given a once a month meeting with a social worker. So here's my suggestion. If Akasia has a contract, which I don't think they should have, but let's say they have it, they need to make a list of commitments, and DHS needs to make sure they enforce it. Secondly, it is clear DHS is not going to give us notification of any of these shelters unless our elected officials somehow pass some kind of regulation that must be followed. The 6-week interim of knowing that these people were coming, which is terrific, that's 6 weeks that we didn't know. And secondly, after what we went through last year and the year before, why weren't more locations looked at? So I'm not really happy about Akasia at all. I don't see any programming being talked about. I just say we have a team. Homes for the Homeless was a terrific presentation. I'm sorry to be so negative, but we went through living hell and really felt badly that the men in that shelter of the Skyline were not getting services.
Thank you. Katie, I want to get some more members of the public in, and then you could, if we can't do a constant answer on every single thing, okay? Yeah,
that's fine.
It's really important that you hear from the public. And also, I remind everybody, introduce yourselves and where you live. Marissa Redanti from West 43rd Street, correct?
Yes, and district leader, thank you.
Katie Stokes, followed by David.
Hi, I'm Katie Stokes, and I live in Chelsea, and I'm a member of Community Board 4 and of the committee HHHS. I just have two very specific questions. One, are there any commercial hotels in Chelsea that have indicated a willingness to DHS to host families or people who are in need of housing? So I'm just wondering if there are those hotels, if they've indicated a willingness. And two, I understand, I think you said that there are 3,500 who have come up from the border. It sounds like maybe we're getting around 500. And I'm just wondering, the other 3,000, are they in Manhattan or being distributed amongst the boroughs? Thanks.
Someone take that, please. Molly?
Sure. Yep. So we have absolutely looked at Chelsea hotels. This was something that we did very much in response to the first meeting that we had with the community board shortly after the Skyline opened. We have not been able to find any hotels that can work with us in Chelsea. We will keep trying. We appreciate the point about the breadth of the district. With respect to distribution of asylum seekers, so we have opened a number of emergency family hotels since this trend started. And I do want to clarify, about 6 weeks ago is when we started to see the trend. We did not identify any sites and then sit on that for 6 weeks. We used up the capacity that we had and have been responding on an emergency basis. So we have one site in Queens, 2 in the Bronx, one other one in Manhattan. There are others that we are looking at across the city. At this point, asylum seekers are the principal driving factor of our families with children census, but there's no single site that is set aside specifically for those seeking asylum. So to the extent that there is a vacancy in a existing shelter, elsewhere in the city, somebody might go there. So I gave you where the emergency capacity has been opened, but also would note that asylum seekers are distributed across the city.
We're going to go to
Joe.
David. Sorry.
Joe, I have a question that I wanted to ask about children. It's related to the undocumented children, especially if I could jump in right now.
Yes, sure.
Molly, because you're on this topic, what is the DHS protocol to get children into school, especially undocumented children?
So we work very closely with the Department of Education, and my colleague Doreen Howe can chime in a little bit more in detail on that, but also recognizing the sort of significant impact that this is having on the city as a whole. There's a City Hall task force where the deputy mayor has convened a large array of agencies to really make sure that we are thinking about the impact overall, and on overall city services, and Department of Education is very much at the table there. But Doreen, do you want to talk more specifically about shelter by shelter services and interaction with DOE?
Sure. So we've been meeting regularly with the leadership at the Department of Education and letting them know where we have needed to open emergency shelter to respond to this crisis. And they are placing DOE representatives in those shelters to help the children get registered for school. We've talked about the fact that the children will need extra supports around language because they are primarily Spanish speaking, although not all are Spanish speaking. And so DOE is looking now at how they can support these families so that the children are able to integrate into the community and get the services that they need. So this is an ongoing conversation, and DOE is committed to trying to serve the children. Undocumented children are allowed to register for school just the way documented children are allowed to register for school.
Doreen, can I just interject? So specifically in our community, for example, at the Skyline, if there's undocumented children and they don't have documentation, for example, a birth certificate they got from here, or those kinds of things that you need when you're going to register for public school, how are they able to enroll?
The liaisons from DOE are assisting the individual families on getting their children registered. Obviously, they know that there are documentation difficulties that families who may be fleeing another country are going to have, and that's not going to stop them from being able to register the children.
Thank you very much, Doreen. I'd like to go to David, and then followed by Steve Belita.
Hey everybody, how you doing? My name is David Stewart. I'm the co-chair of the 45th and 46th Street Block Association in Hell's Kitchen. First of all, I just want to thank you all very much for the very hard and necessary work you all do. It is needed more than ever, and it is greatly appreciated. So thank you for that. That said, I am going to express to you the lived experience, both from residents living in my community and also from people living in the shelters who I talk to, because I live across the street from the Aladdin, in the manner that they are expressing it to me. So first of all, we are not against shelters in this community, right? In fact, we pride ourselves on being extremely welcoming, but we feel as if our welcoming nature is being turned against us like a weapon. And these are the issues that my neighbors wanted me to convey. We are absolutely against oversaturation. That never does anybody any good, and the impact to safety is reaching a critical tipping point in Hell's Kitchen. Oversaturation is a key part of that. The city, number two, the city and service providers, I'm sorry to say, you guys get an F for outreach to the community. You guys do not reach out to us in a proactive manner, and this is about far more than letting us know just that a shelter may be coming. For example, James was talking about the needs of some of the residents. If we knew these folks were coming in, we could have helped you guys get clothing, formula. We could have told you about hotspots of crime. There's so many things we could be doing if we work together. I'm not seeing it. I don't see any kind of plan. And you guys have like great talking points. I forget who said this. I think it was somebody from Homes for the Homeless. You have great talking points about taking a holistic approach. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it. If the holistic approach does not include the community, then it is not holistic. We want to see a plan for outreach to the community. We want to see reports on what is going on inside the shelters, what is happening outside, and we want you guys to listen to us about here's what we are seeing, when we are seeing it, and where we're seeing it. So thank you very much, appreciate it. I'm not just here to complain. We want to be part of the solution, as somebody mentioned. So get us involved, reach out to us, be proactive. Thank you.
Stephen Belita, followed by Elka Fears.
Stephen Belita, HK 4954 Block Association. My block association, the members are, let me reiterate everything that David Stewart just said from his block association. The elderly are afraid to go outside, especially when Akasia was running the Skyline during COVID. I'd like to back up what Travis and what District Leader Redanti said, but even more so, they were drug dealers standing outside on the corner. Nobody from Akasia, nobody from DHS was doing anything about that. There was a man with a gun at the Skyline that went and robbed one of our local stores. The police went and apprehended him, thank God, before he killed someone. There are no programs there whatsoever. As they said, once a month, they don't even do it. The men were the men and the others that were there were left to languish outside. That's not how you work with a community. And for Akasia to stand there and say how well they work with everybody, and this will be different, as everyone said, we don't see it. We're not believing right now. I walked the walk there with Councilmember Botcher and District Leader Redanti, that whole area, and there were people in that shelter walking around naked. Your people there, the DHS, nobody was, Akasia, nobody was doing anything. The police had to be called. We need you guys to really step up to the plate, not tell us what a great job you're going to do, because you haven't shown us that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Elka Fears, followed by Catherine.
Hi, Elka Fears, president of the West 47th 48th Street Block Association. So obviously many of the things that were just said before me, we would concur with. Now it's going to be families, and hopefully it will be a different scene. I'm concerned, number one, I was glad to hear that the time frame of 6 months to 9 months will hold. We've been burned so many times that I don't know how we make sure that absolutely happens. Secondly, where do the families go once that time frame is up? And also the children, they're going to start and be acclimated in the new school system. And as soon as they're acclimated, they'll be there a few months and they're taken out to a whole different neighborhood. It cannot be a good thing for children. We're concerned about that. And again, Akasia has a terrible, terrible reputation in this neighborhood. Just ask our police. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Elka. Catherine, followed by Susan Emile.
Hi there, my name's Catherine. I live here on 50th between 10th and 11th, right around the corner from the skyline. I am a single woman who moved here literally a month before the pandemic. I lived for 4 years down the block of the Aladdin, and I had maybe 3 or 4 incidences in the 4 years that I lived there. During the 2 years of COVID, I mean, I was afraid to walk my dog on the streets. And Amaryllis, I'd like to invite you to come around 9 o'clock to our corner just to see what's going on, because I know you said, you know, the families want, you know, the best for their kids. And there are families on the streets, you know, hanging out at 10:30, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock yesterday. My neighbor sent me a text that the police were having an altercation with a man outside and another woman screaming their faces off. So I reiterate what all of the other neighborhood people have said. We are here. We want to help. We want to support. As I said, I'm a special education teacher. My sister is a social worker. Like, we are people that want to support and help, but we've had a lot of empty promises, and it is to the point where, you know, I'm paying to live in my apartment. I own my apartment, but the level of safety and the level of comfort that I have on my street once the sun goes down, it has decreased immensely. To not be informed of this is just extremely inconsiderate of an area in a neighborhood that has already supported individuals in this situation for the 2 years during the pandemic. So as everyone has said, like, we are here, we want to support individuals. I teach kindergarten and second grade. Like, I want to help children, but to also not be able to go out on my street and walk my dog is a huge problem. There's a ton of trash also on the streets. There is no security. There's no one out there sweeping. Like, you know, everyone's getting their food, eating it outside, throwing it on the floor. Like, there's just a lot going on. I see Desiree shaking her head. Like, it's just not okay to come to a community that is just being rebuilding since the pandemic. And now all of a sudden we're retreating back to the way things were. So I do hope that some of these promises are in fact upheld. The fact that you said you had to borrow staff from other sites, that in and of itself is also not okay. You need to have people that are here that are permanent, that will be supporting these individuals from the time they arrive to the time that they do get that permanent housing. So again, I'm just
24 hours.
24 hours security, please, like, and a cleanup crew. Those are the 2 main things that I think need to be supported.
Thank you, Catherine. Susan Emile, followed by Desiree Millen.
Hi, Susan Emile, and I'm with the 44th Street Block Association. We're in between the 42nd site of the Travelers Inn as well as the Skyline. We have gone through a lot since COVID. We have a lot of problems, and I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but since the beginning of July, the number of incidents that have happened on the street, normally the incidents happen between 8th and 9th, but now the incidents are happening between 9th and 10th and between 10th and the river. We are now becoming a fortress. Our neighbors are putting up gates, and everybody is actually putting up high fences where we used to be a community where tourists would actually take pictures on the stoops and within the street, which is a beautiful street. And now we, you know, I just had a gentleman expose himself to me on Sunday. And you know, this is just a further continuation of what we thought we had gotten over. The Skyline, even though it's on 50th, the activity when it was being used as a COVID shelter ran all the way down from 44th all the way up, where you couldn't really walk up 10th Avenue. We'd sit at the bus station, you know, commuting to work. There were individuals who would like use the bus bench in order to do drugs, to drink. There was police activity. You couldn't walk down the street. There was activity on the corners, drug dealing. People who obviously they should have clothing. There should be clothing given to the people at the shelter. So I just want to reiterate, you know, we are supportive of housing for families. but we need your support in making sure that people can't take in weapons, they can't take in drugs, they can't take in alcohol. And there needs to be a security plan for making sure that people don't hang out on the front of the skyline or, peruse around the neighborhood.
Thank you, Susan. Desiree, followed by Ray Shirazi, followed by JD Nolan. Desiree, you're on mute. Well, Desiree, while you start to unmute yourself, you got it. You got it. We have no sound. Desiree, no sound from you. No. We'll come back to you. Let's go to Ray Shirazi while you work on your sound.
This is Ray Shirazi, 44th Street, between 9 and 10. Excuse me. Just want to emphasize the message of Joe, Maria, and Eric on Community Board 4, which is, number one, the historical reputation and history, and we're not newbies to this, of this community supporting homeless being point one. So you come with a sympathetic audience, but then the message is one of over concentration. And just let's reiterate this. You see the map, and then the response is, oh, it's an emergency. Yet it was an emergency during COVID, and there were multiple years in order to fix and address this situation. Yet no notice, no nothing. And then the response is some sort of legal obligation. I wonder what the legal obligation is to the citizens who live in your jurisdiction. I mean, is that an honest question? And Akasia, I mean, the Skyline Hotel, by the Akasia representative, was, the word we used was chaos. And it was a community threat. And the promises from DHS that it's going to be different this time, I mean, they fall on empty ears. So reiterate, over-concentration, this needs to go away. Reiterate, we have a history of accommodation, but this has gone too far, and it's simply incompetence, in my opinion.
Thank you, Ray. JD Nolan, followed by Joanne Vala. You're on mute, JD.
Sorry about that. I have 4 quick things if I could. First of all, on a personal note, my mother was born in a foreign country. She came here. I have many friends from South America who came here. I have a close friend on 47th Street who spoke tonight, who was born in a foreign country. I welcome these asylum seekers. And I think I can speak for everybody in my community. We welcome them with open arms. I do not want to hear any kind of guilt trip laid on this community, this immigrant community, about asylum seekers and using that as a ploy to make us more welcoming. Our argument is not with the asylum seekers. Our argument is with DHS. There was a letter that came from DH to the community board. I'm sorry, I'm JD Nolan on 48th Street. I am a member of this committee and a member of Community Board 4. A letter came from DHS saying we are focused on the equitable distribution of shelters across the 5 boroughs. I heard that said again tonight. We are focused. That is the language of bureaucracy. That is the language of contempt for this community. We went through this 2 years ago with the buses arriving, no notice, people emptied into the hotels, no notice. Again, we're going through this. This is inexcusable. I want to say thirdly, Midtown North Precinct has the second highest crime statistics in the city. Midtown South has the first highest. Why are you putting vulnerable people in this community with very high crime statistics? Have you considered that? And I want to conclude with, sorry to go on so long, one thing about the providers. You guys do a heroic job. Good for you. My hat goes off to you. It can't be easy. Some of you are better than others. But I have not heard from any provider that spoke that they understand that this community is a community that wants to help, that has certain problems, and then how can we work it out? I haven't heard from any of you. So let me ask this question. Can any of you tell me the name of the public park on 47th and 48th Street? Can you tell me the name of the little public park on 46th Street, between 46th and 45th? Because that's the parks those children are going to have to use. Can you tell me those names? Thank you.
We're going to go to Joanne Havala, and then we'll try Desiree again to see if her sound works. Joanne?
I think my questions were answered somewhat, but I just wanted to weigh in as a resident, a 40-year resident of the Armory on 42nd Street and having entrances on 42nd and 43rd. For many years, the travel in with the young women and their children was, I think, operated in a way that did not impinge on anything of quality of life in the neighborhood. That has changed in the last couple of years. I want to add to the person who said that people are afraid to go out, elderly people particularly, and I was not elderly when I moved here, but I am now. And it has really deteriorated since COVID. All I need to say is they're locking up the ice cream in CVS, and that's a result of the population that was put in here during COVID across 42nd Street. And a question I had on asylum seekers, how do asylum seekers get ported to New York? Do they say, I want to live in New York? Or how does it happen that people are taken so far away and in such concentrations to a city that is so expensive in which to live? Can someone answer that for me?
I'm actually going to let Molly answer that one question because it's a very unique thing that seems to be happening.
Sure, it's a complex answer, but I'll try and be fast. So there are buses, the governors of Texas and Arizona are busing people to Washington, D.C. Largely, honestly, I'm editorializing, but as a
political move.
Thank you, Joe. You can editorialize.
I can say that.
Right, there's a coalition of not-for-profit groups in DC that are offering people bus tickets elsewhere in the country. So some people are coming to New York that way. The Federal Department of Homeland Security is doing some busing away from border states, again, to different parts of the country, and New York is one of them. One of the things that we are hearing anecdotally is that asylum seekers themselves are sharing addresses of shelters, so that may be a piece of it. And I do want to stress here, right? I am saying this is the best information I have. And I am fully aware that these are individuals fleeing horrific circumstances. I'm not trying to blame the victim at all. I am acknowledging this is the information that we know. But I also think, as people have said, New York City has been a welcoming place for immigrants and a land of opportunity for centuries. So I think that is also probably some of it. But we are piecing together information as best as we can. So I want to acknowledge that that's the best I know, but it's probably not perfect information.
I also want to note, just for context, that the Travel Inn and the Skyline have been used for families for years for immediate emergency shelter, but not the entire hotel. It has been a series of rooms. They have been in the background. They have integrated into the community. We've worked with the schools. We've done volunteer work. Not an issue. The difference here is it's the entire building.
And that's a huge difference, I think. And thank you for pointing that out, Joe, because as I walked by the Travel Inn today and looked in on 42nd Street, it's dark and forbidding. It looks like it's closed. It says go around to another spot. It has an entirely different ambiance from when it had before an open hotel with a few rooms for women with babies and fathers coming by and bringing presents and buggies and things like that. It had a wholesomeness that is not there now.
Our community didn't even notice that those rooms were there.
Exactly. I noticed them because I saw the kids out on the street, but they were like anybody else's children. Right. It was a very different situation.
We're going to go, our next speaker is Mayor Mazzata. Oh no, Desiree, is your sound working? You're still on mute. If you unmute, let's see if it happens. No, it doesn't look like it's happening. Sorry.
Now, nothing.
Oh,
it's working.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay, so I manage a building that's catty corner to the Skyline Hotel and the shelter.
Speak a little louder. We're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay, I manage a building that's catty corner to the Skyline Hotel and the 41st Street shelter. I am the third generation of my family to live here. I am raising the fourth generation. I have a 20-year-old and a 13-year-old. So I've lived through the first Clinton Family Inn that was on 49th Street. I can tell you I'm not happy to see it become a shelter again. I think a lot of people who don't interact, who don't have children, maybe don't interact so much, so they don't know the difficulties that it does present. For instance, you know, parents, you know, using vulgar language in the park, cursing at their own children, smoking marijuana. Like, these are all things I dealt with. They would have their boyfriends come visit at night where they would, you know, drink 40 ounces on the corner, blasting music out of a car. Like, these are things that affect our quality of life. I still donated all my children's used clothes and toys and all of that stuff, but it does affect our quality of life. Now, going to the Skyline Hotel, there was one floor of it that was a shelter for many years for single mothers with children. One family was so bad that they literally, no other family would go to the park after this because this mother was encouraging her children to fight and beat up all the other children. The police had to get involved. There's endless stories I could tell you about how this affects our quality of life. So my question to the people running the shelters are, what are you going to do to ensure that these people understand that they are becoming part of our community? We want to welcome you, but don't smoke pot around our kids. Don't smoke cigarettes in the park. Don't be cursing at your kids. Don't, you know, I went to the Skyline the other day to pick up my car. There's about 30 to 40 people hanging out front. The kids are running in and out of the parking garage where the guy is like freaking out because he's scared he's going to hit a kid. Then I hear an employee of the shelter tell two mothers who are rolling a joint to go smoke that around the corner in case ACS comes. So is this how they're going to run their shelter? That's what I want to know. What are they going to do?
Desiree, thank you very much. And by the way, the meeting's recorded and all the questions we have, we're going to assemble for Molly and for Marika, a lot of the questions in the Q&A, so you can give us responses that are very specific that I think is going to take up too much time for tonight. Going to Mayor Mazzata, followed by Dolores Rubin.
Hi, Joe. My name's Michael. I live over on 529. Hello, everybody in the community on West 42nd. Thanks for letting us know that you're going to be recording this for the questions. So I don't need to worry about actually specifically dialoguing. I could just say what I need to say and this will be reviewed.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for everybody's effort. And just really quick, I mean, you know, everybody knows the stories. So I just want to briefly say my wife and I, we on St. Patrick's Day, we were involved in an attempted robbery on 10th Avenue, 9th Avenue rather, over by 42nd Street. And a mounted police officer actually broke it up. You know, I mean, the normal stuff, the children on the street, you know, it's heartbreaking seeing that. I've been propositioned for sex at the Travelers Inn, which is, you know, it's sad, you know, to see people in that state. So it's real, it's contextualized. I confronted a guy 2 weeks ago that was walking around with a hammer. You know, I know these are issues, and just so you know, like, as a community member, I get it. I come from the system. That's part of my background, but I have some very specific questions. There was somebody named David that said that Akasia gets an F, and I have to agree, but I don't want to just throw incendiary things. You know, I know this is an incredibly difficult issue, but here's how I think you guys could get an A. Number one, if we can get in response to this question, if it's recorded, I would really appreciate a list of phone numbers and emails for all of the employees associated with all the facilities that we're discussing here, from the highest level down, because I would like to, as a neighbor, introduce myself. You know, I can meet you in person, I can write you an email, I could talk to you, whatever it is, but I don't want to feel like I'm getting sidelined again, because we didn't know that you guys were coming and it was unannounced. And if it wasn't unannounced, you'd be happy to know that there's people that have come out of the systems that understand what accountability in a well-run facility looks like. I've gotten to know many of the homeless people in the area. I take the time to introduce myself. There's no accountability. There's no point system. They're not being kicked out. You know, the AG is not prosecuting. There's no place to send these people. The recidivism is through the roof. The drug dealing is increasing tenfold. The police are worried about the qualified immunity. They're not doing anything. We need to have the names and numbers of the people, from the elected officials down to the people running these facilities. As neighbors, we have to get to know them. And we need to tell you guys when you're doing a great job, and you need to hear from us all the time if you suck, because we're not going to just stand here and take this. You got to do a good job. I know these people are down and out. I know they need help. It's a beautiful thing. My God, I'm happy to give my taxes to see a little child get fed and go to school, or a guy who's down and out get back on his feet, man. But for people that are not operating under the system, they're violating the system. They're coming in past curfew. First of all, is there a curfew? Are they stealing? Are they getting in trouble with the police? They should be kicked out. When they're kicked out, what's the protocol for that? I want to know specifically what happens to people that are phased out of the shelter due to behavioral issues, especially if they have, you know, that level, and what happens? Why do they wind up right back at the same facility? I've been seeing a guy for 2 years who suffers, man. He suffers. I've watched him all winter, almost die on a cold blue night. And I couldn't even get the guy off the street. I stood in 2 feet of snow while the cops were mad at me for insisting that they take him, and the guy wouldn't go. But he should have been in the freaking shelter. So this has to get cleaned up. Real quick, the phone numbers. I'd like to know the protocol for problematic clients. I repeat that. I'd like the public to be made aware of what is your specific protocol for problematic clients. You know, that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Michael. And we will do a full follow-up on this in September, and we're going to get this list of questions to DHS and the provider, so we get those specific things and go through them point by point. Tonight was just getting information out, make sure everyone knows what the hell's going on. Loris, before you, Joseph Heitch came in earlier and I missed him. Joseph, do you want to speak? Joseph? I guess doesn't want to speak to Loris Rubin.
No, he just came off.
Can you hear
me?
There
you go. There you go. Go ahead. Just go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So, look, I know I don't want to reiterate kind of what other folks have said necessarily, but I will say I've lived on the street for a little over 6 years. I'm on 42nd between 10th and 11th. It has fundamentally changed, and not for the better. It's definitely gotten worse. I do just have a few quick questions. One, can neighborhoods deem specific providers unfit to provide services within their districts? Two, do providers have to verify and be subject to audit that they have in fact provided the services that they've promised and that some form of governmental organization is paying for? Three, I know we've heard a lot about plans and bullet points and everyone's going to be amazing. And I think the last gentleman also said something about accountability, but I'm really curious, can DHS publish a plan that outlines the mechanisms that are fully transparent of accountability and consequences for when organizations and service providers are not actually doing what they've been contracted to do?
Thank you, Joseph.
And then
I'm
four,
sorry.
so just one more thing. Can DHS publish the list of facilities and hotels that they are evaluating? Like, again, I think everyone in this community is very supportive of just you know, a lot of people are in unfortunate circumstances. We want to help. It's clear this is a density issue and not necessarily a support issue. And I think if you could publish a transparent, publicly available list of facilities you are evaluating on a rolling basis, then that would let us know that you actually are evaluating other facilities outside of our district. But right now it feels like you're literally just putting a pin in Hell's Kitchen and saying it all goes here. I know that's not necessarily true, but that is definitely the feeling. And so I think transparency here would go a long, long way.
Thank you very much. Going to Yadira, then Dolores.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Yudira Jimenez, and I live on 41st Street. I've been a resident for about 13 years, and I'm a member of CB4. I just want to echo what everyone else has stated regarding our safety and lack of transparency. I was actually the very first one, probably one of the first people to reach out to Eric regarding setting up donations for asylum seekers. So I'm more than happy to welcome people in need and help out in any way possible. However, I am actually a person who has actually escaped being mugged probably 5 times in about 2 years. So there's definitely a genuine concern for safety. And you all keep talking about having families and how it's going to be different. I don't agree with that. Just this past Sunday, taking a walk along 10th Avenue, and I'm walking past groups of people outside of the skyline, smoking weed, cigarettes, drinking, with babies in strollers right outside of the skyline. Why aren't there any case managers available 24/7 reeling these people in and making sure that not only are they not disrupting the community, but how could you smoke around your child, even if it's outside? So definitely big concern for the safety of the community and the children that are being affected by these irresponsible parents. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Weber, followed by Christine Gorman.
Thank you, Joe. Am I cutting off Dolores? I thought she was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm good.
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay.
I apologize. Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you, CB4. And Leilani, I know you know who I am. I'm Brian Weber. I'm the co-chair of West 36th Street, and I'm also the president of the Midtown South Precinct Community Council. During COVID, as was discussed by so many on this call already, emergency situation, DHS relocated approximately 2,200 beds into neighborhood hotels. Our neighborhood is still dealing with the ramifications of that, and many of the people on this call have alluded to it. My question is rhetorical. Has DHS learned nothing from that experience? JD brought up a letter that was written to the board talking about how DHS will focus on, and I'm paraphrasing here, not clustering social service establishments within close proximity to one another. We haven't brought it up on this call, but on West 41st and Dyer, you were opening up a shelter steps from Covenant House, another social service provider. So it's as if nothing that occurred in the past 2 years lingers in the collective knowledge of DHS, because here we are back in a very similar situation. And I find it very troubling that DHS is trying to sell this to the neighborhood as these are families, immigrant families, asylum seekers. We are a sympathetic community. We are a sympathetic city, but it has to be done intelligently for those in shelter and in need of services, and for the community as well. I've heard the providers talk about the responsibility that they share for the individuals in the shelters they put them in, but they also must share the responsibility for the communities that they go into. And many of the speakers on this call have talked and given examples of the impact these facilities are having in the communities. One last note, and I think DHS really needs to be aware of this. JD talked about how Midtown North has the highest per capita, second highest per capita crime in New York City. Midtown South currently has the highest per capita crime by a large margin in New York City. And a large percentage of that is narcotic activity. You must be aware that along the stretch of 8th Avenue, extending into 9th Avenue in the lower West 40s, we have significant crack activity. And south of that, in the West 30s, we have significant heroin activity. I would implore you to make sure that your security efforts around the shelters are redoubled, because that activity will come and prey upon the residents in your shelters. So you must protect the residents in your shelters, and you must extend that protection onto the streets and the community. Please help us. And, you know, I echo the community board's request to immediately find a more appropriate and suitable location for the temporary shelters in our neighborhood, and never do this to us again. We don't want to have these calls with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Before Christine speaks, I want to read something from Gail Gondek, one of the public who is not able to get her sound to work. She wanted to comment, the city's reneged on its plan for 9th Avenue and 54th Street to develop affordable housing, and now it's changed to homeless housing. There's also a women's shelter plan for 537 West 59th Street to house 200 women. Representatives from DHS and Akasia acted as if the projects are the only ones slated for Hell's Kitchen. That's just was in the Q&A. Going to Christine Gorman, followed by Jeffrey LaFrancois. We have two more.
I thought you had Dolores.
No.
Oh, okay. So I'm not going to repeat what everyone else has said, but I had some specific questions. Molly talked about a map that you referenced of placing different shelters and so forth. Can you share the map with us? Just as I know Joe has shared the map of Hell's Kitchen with you. And then something that a number of us have been impressed by over the years in dealing with NYPD is the comp stats that give us specific locations. And I mean, the reason why we know that Midtown North and Midtown South are second and first in per capita crime. Is there some way that we can have similar accountability? Somebody mentioned scores for the shelters. Can you share those scores and explain to us what those scores mean? And is there a way for us to have, the way we do with our local precincts, monthly meetings with DHS and the other agencies, because I know it's not just DHS that deals with homelessness, so that we can talk about what's going on a ground level? Those are my questions.
Thank you, Barbara. Sorry, thank you, Christine. And we have two more members of the public, and then I want to close the public since we're coming on 8:20, and then we'll have some questions from Jeffrey, our board chair. So going to Barbara Blair.
Hello, I'm Barbara Blair. I'm the president of the Garment District Alliance in the Midtown South Precinct catchment area. And I just want to reiterate, we do indeed have the highest crime rates in the city. I would like to request two things. One, a map from DHS of where all the shelters in the city of New York, 5 boroughs, are located. And the other thing I would like to request from our elected officials, Eric Botcher, is legislation that precludes any social services and or homeless shelters or services being within 500 feet of a service that is doing any kind of drug treatment, needle exchange, methadone clinic, and those kinds of services, which is a highly vulnerable population, as are people that don't have permanent homes. So legislation with a 500-foot rule that precludes shelters next to individual services for people with drug addictions, and also a 5-borough map of where the shelters are located. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Domas Lulu next, and then Jeffrey LaFrancois. Domas? You're on mute. While you work that out, we'll see if you can, we'll go to Jeffrey.
Yeah, very specific. You know, I know the city is getting away from hotels, but my understanding is you have to have and this should be a yes or no, you have to have a willing owner of the hotel to take on shelter residents, correct?
Yes.
Yes, and then the city is also limited by the cost it can spend per room at that hotel. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so when was that limit established?
There's no legal dollar limit. It's a negotiation with that involves the Office of Management and Budget and does reflect the current hotel environment. But you know, there are very high-end luxury hotels that we would not even look at as potential shelter options.
Right, but it is notable that there are hotels in other neighborhoods, prominent neighborhoods, where now my understanding is, I guess, I thought there was a cap on the price paid per unit, but given like the cities cost a lot of money, I wouldn't have a problem with the city paying more money to better spread out folks in hotels to other neighborhoods. You know, saturation has been the echo today. And I have to say, it has been easier to listen to what folks have had to say tonight because it has been about management and saturation, not about we do not want these people. And so I just wonder if DHS is not tied to a cap on cost, what's the approach to other neighborhoods?
So I do want to, I hear the saturation concerns and loud and clear. I also want to be very clear that we have opened 6 hotels and 2 other emergency sites in the Bronx, in other parts of Manhattan, and in Queens in the last 4 weeks, right?
In addition to the 2 that are on our docket tonight?
Yeah, and just the Travelers Inn has gone through a lot of different iterations, for better or for worse. And I am not making the case that this is, we don't think of that one as a brand new hotel because we have had an ongoing presence in it. It was most recently isolation. When it was isolation at various points in time, it had a very low census depending on the ebb and flow of COVID. I understand that the population there now is different, and that is, I've been taking very diligent notes and I am looking forward to the transcript, but so we're taking back all of this feedback. But the in addition to the site that we have opened in your district, we have responding to this emergency. So far it is a 3-borough, 6-7 neighborhood response, and we are continuing to respond in different neighborhoods.
Molly, thank you. But I would note again for the public record that the owner of these 2 hotels, the Skyline and the Travel Inn, has benefited from the payment of city funds for decades and decades. They know how to manage this system to get the best reimbursement rate from the city to pay them because they're very willing. So they are making a huge profit off DHS's payments for reimbursement. And that is just factual. This owner has done this for decades and decades. Isn't that correct?
Part of the reason that we are very publicly committed to ending the use of hotels is that it is not an efficient use of city resources.
Right. It is an incredible enrichment for one owner. I want to note again that we have had, the community board has gotten serious complaints from the buildings adjacent to Travel Inn and to Skyline since this new iteration has happened, not since the COVID stuff. The new iteration has happened. And what has happened is there have been issues, people pushing into lobbies, following people. There's been the Skyline, if you want pictures, we'll give you pictures of what's happening during the week and on the weekend. So we really ask you to look at that. We have, I think Domus is able to speak now, yes? So unmute and we can hear you, and then we'll go to Dolores. No, you have to unmute. We can't hear you, you're on mute. She can't fix it. We can't hear anything you're saying at all. Sorry, I would say just put your information in the Q&A, and then we'll make sure that it gets recorded, okay? Dolores.
Hi, I'm a member of this committee, 53-year resident of West 55th Street, and I'm also the president of the Midtown North Police Precinct Community Council. I think you've heard very clearly from this community that we understand the issues, that we're welcoming. We also have been a great partner in non-emergency times. We want to continue to be a great partner. How have we been a great partner? We have, from the very beginning, been part of the citing process, been part of the conversation of concerns and issues and pointing out things as another agency, which a community board is, another agency to assist in the role of DHS. DHS, shame on you. I understand that you're operating in emergencies. I understand that probably your staffing is tough, but as Brian Weber said, have you learned nothing in the last 2 years? In normal times, it's an adjustment period for any operation that is handling the homeless population coming into a neighborhood. We have good operators that even at the beginning, they have issues of their residents having to readjust to where they are and what's happening to them. The fact that we are not communicating early and often when you are thinking about bringing in folks into this community is a detriment, not only to the community, but it's a detriment to the people you are trying to serve. One thing that is very notable, you've heard from the community, the mission-driven organizations are trying their best. But what we see on the ground is that it is not enough. When ambulances and police are called at a frequent rate, that is disruptive to the fabric of the neighborhood. It's also disruptive to those clients. We're an agency, just like DHS. You need to use us as a resource to solve for some of these problems because we are problem solvers. So shame on you for ignoring us and treating us like an ignorant community that is not willing to help. Going forward, as an agency, you need to figure out how to not only serve the end clients, but to serve the overall community in which your end clients will end up getting those services.
I just want to note for the record that Domus Lulu has a store on West 45th Street between 9th and 10th Avenues. They were attacked in the last month. Their store was trashed by a homeless mentally ill person. And in fact, they were physically attacked during that. And that's why she was trying to relate to us. We really have a serious public safety matter here in this district. We are always part of a solution, but sometimes providers are not exactly the best providers, not what their record has shown. In these two cases of the temporary shelters, for whatever period of time they're here, the board will send a clear list to DHS of what we expect to happen so the public safety is not diminished even further. And in the short time they've been open, I must say, Amaryllis, directly to you, they have not been managed well. We know, in fact, that you have a hard time staffing up because everyone has a hard time staffing up. The problem is when we respond to emergencies without adequate staff and without adequate supervision, you create incredible problems for the entire neighborhood around you, whether it's asylum seekers or whether it's families with children. Nobody is perfect and no one expects it. But I also know in the supportive housing I operate, we go outside and we keep people off a sidewalk and we engage with people to make sure those individuals don't create problems for the neighbors and everyone around them. We expect you to do the same. And I'm glad that you were here to hear directly that this is not a new thing. This is an ongoing issue. Leilani has been with us through all of COVID. Molly has been with us through all of COVID. We do not want to go back to that spot again as a community. I want to turn it over to Maria to sum up before I thank everybody.
Oh, thank you, Joe. I thought you did a good job. I'll start with something that I was going to say earlier. I myself, Joe already shared a little bit about me, but the other thing that I think is important to give perspective about how I feel about being a co-chair of this committee and how important it is to me is that I myself was born and raised in this community. I myself was a shelter resident when I was a child at Homes for the Homeless site, the one that's in Saratoga. And that helps to guide me and give perspective. And in my role as co-chair, I you know, it's really important what the community is saying, and that's what I'm here to represent right now. And I want to speak directly to DHS and the shelter providers, all of the shelter providers and leadership who are on this Zoom right now. We hear you. We understand that there is currently an emergency. We understand, we get it, but please hear us. Please hear the lived experiences of the permanently housed community members, which summed up in a few words, I would say is a fear about the chaos that we've already seen. And I'm using that word chaos. Amaryllis, you mentioned it. And it's a true depiction of what was really occurring in the community. To be clear, the concern is not the families or the single adults living in the shelter. Even if it sounds that way, that's not what the concern is. The concern is the significant increase and concentration in a community that already has a high number of social services, right? The concern is poor planning, and we just went through it in 2020. The concern is the impact, and the concern is the lack of communication, okay? With more advanced communication and forethought, the city could have reached out to stakeholders and the community board, and we could have suggested providers and sites that are fitting for our community. We demand you do better, and we are requesting a reduction of the number of beds in Hell's Kitchen. And Joe, do you want to say anything else before I thank everyone for being here tonight?
Maria and I normally always prepare for meetings, double check as we sort of walk home from our jobs to get ready for a meeting like this. As I was talking to her on my block, I was followed by a mentally ill homeless man who was masturbating, who tried then to follow me into my building. That's our lived experience here. The absolutely bizarre things that happen. The folks that get robbed, the folks that get knocked down. This is a problem that we're experiencing that is well beyond what we've ever experienced in our lives in this community. We know DHS is not going to wave any magic wand, nor the providers can fix everything in a day. We're clear about that. But your choice, even in emergencies, not to work with us, really flies in the face of any sort of sound public action, because the consequence of the COVID circumstance, and now this, has taken this community and turned it against being welcoming to those in the deepest need. We've said this before, you have to hear it again. Our council member, our state senator, our assembly members have heard it, and we need you to manage better and to distribute and not concentrate everything just in Hell's Kitchen. That's our message. We know you cannot answer everything tonight, but I want to say to Molly, I want to say to Amaryllis, to Leilani, to Aaron, to Doreen, everyone who works in this day in and day out. We know you have the goddamn hardest jobs in the world. There's not even a question on that. And we want to work with you as partners, but this is not the way to get a partnership to work. And we really need to know that as you operate, whether it's a temporary or permanent shelter, that you will operate it in the context of being inside and within our community, and then work with us to deconcentrate and not to have so many things here at the same time. I really want to thank the public for the number of people. We've had between 104 and 117 people in this meeting the whole night. No one has gone, only a few people have gone away. It's down to 104 now. And you've also listened to us, and you've been respectful and thoughtful. And we know your jobs are not easy. But as Maria said, we really expect you to do better. And then going forward, do better with all of us. But Jesse, I think the biggest thing we'll ask is that we'll get Molly all the questions that were put in there, get them to you in advance. The meeting is on YouTube. Jesse can send you the link for that. And I thank you for everyone being very respectful back and forth, but also hearing that we're just at the end of our rope. And we're actually past the end of our rope. That's what I want to say. So thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank you all the public for being here. And we will pick this conversation up again and get responses back at our September meeting. I think it's, Jesse, when is that date?
The September meeting?
Yeah. The September meeting is
the 15th.
Yeah.
Say that again, you cut out.
It is the 15th.
September 15th, we'll pick this up again, and hopefully we'll meet in advance to sort of prepare back and forth so the community can get solid answers about
information. Can I add, yes, just because we asked homes for the homeless to provide a lot of information, and they did put together a pretty thorough presentation that I think is rightly to move over because we had a lot of questions from the public. But I just want to make sure that people understand that they did provide that. We can share that if upon request.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we can post it on our website so everyone can see it, and also with Homes for Homeless.
The PowerPoint presentation that they provided.
Yes, they did a PowerPoint presentation and also a social service checklist that we'll share so that we have good, transparent information and everyone knows what's going on. And then we understand that Akasia is working on the same thing to get us information so we can get that also there. Again, thank you all very, very much for a long evening. We just spent 2 hours and 7 minutes, and we'll see most of you again in September. And thank you, DHS, for taking this very seriously. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good evening.
Good night.